So remember glial cells? Your book talks about these early in the chapter, but I find it to be, I think, more logical to talk about glial cells after you go over typical action potential, how typical action potentials are conducted. So glial cells actually do quite a variety of things. And you can read in your text a bit about astrocytes and all the many functions that they serve. And so here is a list. What I want to focus on is the role of glial cells in producing myelin. And remember, it was myelin, that fifth structure that speeds up neural transmission. Oligodendrocytes produce myelin in the brain and spinal cord and the central nervous system, and then Schwann cells produce myelin in the peripheral nervous system. They're both glial cells, but they produce myelin in slightly different ways. So what myelin does is it speeds up neural transmission. And you can see from this image that myelin isn't continuous along the entire axon. It's in segments. It's kind of like in hot dog buns. And there's actually lots of myelin along, lots of little segments of myelin along an axon. And these different spaces, these spaces between pieces of myelin are called the nodes of Rambier. And so the way action potentials work in a myelinated neuron is that the action potential occurs at the node of Rambier, and like before, the sodium diffuses forward, but because the axon is covered by myelin, the sodium channels can't open, and so the sodium just keeps diffusing. And so that's what this arrow is representing, is the diffusion of sodium underneath the myelin. And you can see it's losing its positive charge, but it will stay positive enough to produce a threshold of depolarization at the next node of Rambier, and the charge will be refreshed, the sodium channels will open, more sodium will come into the axon, and then the sodium will diffuse along the axon. Potassium is doing the same thing. Those ion channels will open after the sodium and will it'll make the charge inside of the axon at the node of Rambier negative again, but the sodium will diffuse on down, and then the action potential will happen again at the next node of Rambier. So why does this happen? How does this speed up neural transmission? And the way it speeds up neural transmission is because that diffusion of sodium underneath the myelin is actually faster than opening and then closing all of the sodium and then potassium ions. So here's a little website where you can simulate what's called saltatory conduction. So this neural transmission in a myelinated neuron is saltatory conduction. So you can use this little exercise to demonstrate how saltatory conduction is faster than typical action potentials in a non-myelinated neuron.